Hi, I'm Ben. Welcome back to my channel. This is another Women's Prize vlog, kind of. I filmed a bunch of B-roll footage of stuff I've been up to include in the vlog, but then I managed to forget to include my thoughts about the Women's Prize books that I was reading along the way. So I'm kind of going to do it like this. I will share my thoughts on one of the books, then I'll play some footage, then I'll come back and I will review another book, and we'll do that a couple of times. I've got 3 books to talk about in total in this video, and I'm gonna start with a book that didn't make the shortlist, which is Paradiso 17 by Lillith Assadi. So reading this one gave me a very specific feeling that I am now going to inflict on all of you as well. And if you've read my review of this one on Instagram, I apologise because I am going to repeat myself. My question to you is, have you ever heard of the block universe theory in physics? And the idea of this is that the past, present and future are all equally real at once, and time is just our perception of moving through that block. And the reason I bring this up is because this is genuinely what this book felt like to me as I was reading it. So it opens with the protagonist Sufyan on his deathbed, and from there the novel steps backwards through his life, moving across decades and countries and cities, tracing his experiences all the way from the 1948 Nakba onwards until we catch up with him back on his deathbed. He leaves Palestine, he spends time in refugee camps, he moves through different versions of exile and displacement, always searching for something that feels like home. And one thing that is really interesting actually is that this feeling of home he longs for isn't actually tied to Palestine itself, at least not directly. Instead, he longs for the feeling that he had at the refugee camp in Kuwait, which I think says something quite complicated and sad about memory and belonging. Structurally, you might have picked up this is basically a cradle to grave novel told in lots of short chapters, but interestingly in each chapter it is titled after its final few words. And at first I found this like a little bit gimmicky, a little irritating, almost like the book was too aware of its own cleverness. But as I kept reading, that did eventually click into place for me, because knowing those words in advance creates this sort of strange sense of inevitability of what's about to happen. And what I was doing was starting to anticipate how these words would arrive on the page, how they will be delivered and in what context. Sometimes I would read some words that sounded quite negative and I would hope that they might land differently than I was expecting. And this, paired with the fact that the novel opens at the end of Sufyan's life, it creates this atmosphere where everything feels quite predetermined, which is why it made me think about the block universe. And in the same way that that theory is strange and quite unfathomable and dreamlike, the prose itself is quite dreamy and impressionistic as well. It actually took me a little while to settle into it, although I think that is partly because I've recently read a lot of very clipped, precise prose, and this is not that. But once I did adjust to it, I found quite a lot to admire, even if it's not my favourite style of writing. What it lent itself really well to, though, was handling yearning and guilt and displacement. There's a lot about what it means to leave somewhere and never return, and the strange emotional contradictions that can be wrapped up in that. I also did appreciate that the book never tries to flatten its complexity, but there are, I guess, ways in which that complexity means that it can be hard to understand characters and understand what's driving them, what do they want, what are they actually trying to achieve. And it's not always very clear with these characters. They are frequently frustrating or mean to each other, their relationships are messy, and their ambitions kind of curdle over time. They get clipped off and they give up. And so I do think the book is interested in people as contradictory beings who can hold multiple points of view and feelings, rather than just being sort of symbolic or have this overarching goodness or badness. And the more that I think about this book, the more that it does remind me of Flashlight by Susan Choi, another book that's on the long list and now the short list. Not necessarily stylistically, but emotionally and thematically. And I do think if you liked Flashlight, I suspect there's a good chance that you will also enjoy this one as well. So overall, I thought it was a thoughtful book. I thought it was structurally interesting. It was quite affecting. And the more you move through the block of its universe, the more is revealed. which is, I guess, kind of obvious to say. But yeah, I enjoyed it. It wasn't a favourite, but I did enjoy the time I spent with it. So now let's go to a little trip I took to London and some reading and stuff that I did while I was there, and I'll tell you about some of that when I'm back. Welcome back. I'm still here. Yeah, I could not resist a trip to the flagship foils when I was in London, and also went to the Waterstones in Gower Street, which I think is one of the best Waterstones in the country. It's just got so many flaws. It's kind of old and crooked and fun to explore. They have a lot of like random imports and remainder books that are always fun to explore. I didn't see any, and I often don't see any that I want from them, but it is nice to see like MYRB classics on the shelves in a UK bookshop. The two books that I did get on that trip were Transcription by Ben Lerner, which I've already read and raved about and probably won't shut up about for the rest of the year, and Celestial Lights by Cecile Pinn, which I have not yet read but would like to, because books set in space are always a good time. We also went to see the Stranger Things play in London, and I cannot remember the name of the theatre that it's at, but it was really, really good. I've kind of lost interest in Stranger Things, and I didn't even watch the final season because I just don't really care how the story wraps up. It's taken far too long to get to the end, and I think the writing of Stranger Things has given a little bit too much into fan service than it has to really good storytelling. It seems, from what I've heard, to suffer quite a lot from the Netflix-itis of assuming that nobody knows what's going on all the time, so you have to constantly repeat the plot and the character motivations, which in my eyes is not a great way to write television. But the stage show was really good, if only for the staging and the impressiveness of the production of it all. Like, it has these enormous set pieces, it's lots of fun, it's set at a time when Hopper and I cannot remember what Will's mum is called, but their characters are younger, and some crazy stuff happens, of course, because it's the world of Stranger Things, but it is just so incredible what they managed to achieve on stage. There's some like massive pieces of set that move around, and I won't spoil anything, but I would definitely recommend going to see it if you get the chance. I also, in this time, finished Wild Dark Shore by Charlotte McConaghy, and this is a book that I went into fully expecting to love because it's been hugely hyped. I've heard loads and loads of praise for McConaghy from readers in Australia and North America, not just for this book, but for many of her books. I have managed to acquire all of her books already, but this was the first one that I've actually read. Sadly, though, it didn't really work for me. I think the setup is pretty strong. So we've got this father and his 3 children living on this remote island that houses a seed bank, basically a backup of the world's plant life. And this place is originally intended as a safe haven against climate catastrophe, except the irony is that the island itself is now being destroyed by rising sea levels and increasingly violent weather. The family are the only people remaining on the island for reasons that gradually become clear. And then one day a woman washes up on the shore with her shaven head, and she's carrying some secrets of her own. And structurally, I think the book does a really good job of creating momentum and tension. There are all of these overlapping ticking clocks. So the family are waiting to be evacuated. The island is slowly collapsing into the sea. This woman is trying to uncover and retrieve the things she has come here for. And I did fly through it. Like, it kept me turning the pages. And I also think, to be fair to the book, that the climate change elements are handled effectively and with a lot of urgency. There is this sense of environmental instability and loss that does come across really well. But honestly, that's where my compliments stop, because I just did not buy into any of these people as actual human beings. The younger son in particular felt bizarrely precocious, like this tiny encyclopedia walking around dispensing ecological knowledge. And then the daughter is this sort of manic pixie seal girl who sleeps on the beach with the seals, which is just preposterous. And then a huge amount of the plot heavily depends on people refusing to talk to each other or to have these really obvious conversations that would ease the problems that they're facing. And this always drives me up the wall in fiction, because I just want authors to be like a little bit more inventive with how they put barriers up between people. Just refusing to have a conversation is not a good enough reason in my mind. There is all this secrecy and withholding that feels engineered purely to sustain tension. And then layered on top of that is this sort of instant love storyline that I found really unconvincing. The emotional beats of it just did not land for me at all. I do think the prose is interesting in that I don't think it's bad on a sentence level, but it is extremely heightened and melodramatic. Every moment feels like it is straining to be profound or emotionally devastating. And after a while, I became a little numb and almost resistant to that. And then the ending, my God, the ending really annoyed me. Obviously, I'm not going to spoil it, but after spending the entire book tolerating this melodrama and the tropes, the payoff, in my mind, did not justify itself to me at all. So yeah, this was unfortunately a miss. It is very readable, it's very pacey, probably works brilliantly for some people, but absolutely not one for me. That's another one that didn't make the shortlist, which has been announced, and I'm not going to give my thoughts on the shortlist too much because I think I might save that for a separate video. However, I do only have one more book from the shortlist to read, and that is The Mercy Step by Marcia Hutchinson. I did pick this up a while ago because I saw it was on like the shelves of my local indie bookshop early, and I got really excited and bought the copy, and then it just sat on my bedside table not being read. One thing I will mention actually is that this is like a bigger than standard paperback, which is fine. It wasn't like the size of book I was expecting. But then I've also seen copies that are just the normal size paperback, and I wish I would have seen one of those before I bought this one, because I do prefer just all of my books to be one normal size, which is quite particular, I know, but I'm quite a neat and particular person. Anyway, that's enough of my first world problems. I'm just going to get on and read the book, and then I will come back and let you know my thoughts about it. Right, I'm back. Let's talk about The Mercy Step. And this is about a young girl named Mercy who, like the author, is a child to Windrush generation parents. And she, I think, is the 7th child her mother has had. There are 4 back in Jamaica. And then she is the 3rd since coming to the UK, but not the last. And we follow her from the day she's born until she's like 11. So it is a child narrator the whole time. And we are with her as she navigates the UK school system, which I guess is confusing and definitely was back then when you had this mixture of different types of school when you were sort of put into a lane, and that would determine a lot of the rest of your life. She navigates her community in Bradford, up in the north of England, where it was not always welcoming and often racist. She's got an abusive father and actually quite a lot of terrible men in and outside of her family. One thing I will say right up front is that I read this physically, but I also dipped in and out of the audiobook now and again, like listening along while I read. And I think the writing is a little bit twee, but Marcia Hutchinson's narration is really, really good. She reads it herself, and the way that she reads is full of warmth and life that I think works really well with the writing. So if you were going to read this, I think that would be a really nice way to experience the book. That said, I have to confess that I didn't really enjoy this all that much, and the chief problem for me was character. It's a very close third person, and it is bookended by a couple of first person sections actually, but I just found that Mercy is far too precocious. She is too knowing. Like, the book literally starts in the womb and she is thinking about writing a letter to the Times. It's obviously purposeful, right? It's a stylistic effect, and this could be fine, except I feel like the book wants to have its cake and eat it, because as well as being knowing, like to a very strange extent, she is also conveniently naive and doesn't know some things, and it feels like she doesn't know them just so the text can say some sort of common phrase in a funny way. So instead of getting a certificate, she'll say, "Oh, where's the surfy ticket?" It doesn't actually say this in the text, but I was waiting for someone to get a stomachache and her to be like, "Oh, that doesn't sound like a very nice type of cake." It's that sort of thing that happens throughout the book. And sometimes that just makes no sense at all. So the family, for instance, get a TV, and it's set in the 60s, so getting a TV is a big deal and lots of people want to come around and see what it's like and watch it. And she calls it a TV, like spelled out TEEVEE, as a way to signal like she doesn't know what this is, this strange new device. But then immediately she describes it as being like a Dalek in the corner. But if you didn't have a TV and you haven't seen Doctor Who, how would you know what a Dalek is? It's just some of that logical stuff that really tripped me up sometimes. And then I think slightly separately from the precociousness of the narrative voice, there is this problem that Mercy is just too good at absolutely everything. There is maybe one thing in the whole book that she is not able to do, but she is the best at drawing. She is so clever. She gets moved up multiple years at school. She is the best runner in the entire school when she finds the distance that works for her. Oh yeah, she's like rubbish at rounders until it's noticed that she's left-handed, and so she switches hands and she hits it out of the park, and then she wins a poetry competition. She even goes along to a mortgage meeting when she's like 8 years old. I do genuinely appreciate the idea that determination can get you where you want to be, and that many disadvantages are systemic, and with support and effort it's possible to achieve the things that you want and your dreams. I think it is a really powerful story to tell about a young black girl in the 60s. But for me, Mercy's capabilities are so dialed up to 11 that you end up seeing her as almost this mythically special person. And for me, that kind of undermined the effect that the story was trying to have. The further I read on, the less of a problem this became, because it was able to be, I don't know, more believable that an 8-year-old would do some mortgage percentage calculations than like a 4-year-old counselling her mother to leave her bad marriage. And part of me wonders, had the book started a little later without this genuinely impossible section from the perspective of a new baby, I wonder would I have been less put off by that and not have been reading with this sort of dissenting mindset. I will finish on some positives. Like, I did like that the North is represented. There's not enough northern fiction published, and there are some really pleasing narrative arcs, things that come around again and display some real character development, like things that Mercy faces, and then eventually she makes a different choice or she stands up for herself. Those are really good. And although the writing style was a little bit more twee than I would usually prefer, there were definitely lines and moments that made me laugh. Ultimately, I think what will make or break the novel is how you get on with the voice. And unfortunately, I just didn't buy into it. But that does bring me to the end of the Women's Prize shortlist, and I think I'll do a separate video where I rank the shortlisted books and guess what I think the winner will be and give my own personal winner, and we can have a discussion about that then. In the meantime, do let me know if you have read any of the books that I've talked about today. Do you agree with my take on these books or not? I suspect quite a lot of people really love The Mercy Step because I have seen really positive comments about it before. But I'd love to hear like what worked about that book for you and why you loved it so much. So do let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please do hit like, and if you'd like to see more from my channel, then hit subscribe. But until next time, toodles.